Hello, dear YouTube viewers. I hope you're doing well. Okay, so let's start our video. The night was quiet, the kind of silence that usually brought comfort, but lately it felt heavier than ever. We lay side by side in the darkness, our breaths uneven, separated by more than just the space between us. She shifted closer, her hand brushing against my arm, a soft, hesitant gesture reaching out for connection. For a moment I froze, torn between wanting to respond and the weight pressing down on my chest. Instead of turning toward her, I pulled away, rolling onto my side with my back to her. The silence that followed wasn't the kind that lulls you to sleep. It was sharp, almost cutting. I could feel the disappointment radiating from her, though she didn't say a word right away. I stared into the dark, pretending to search for rest, but in truth I was wide awake, tangled in thoughts I had tried to ignore for months. It wasn't that I didn't love her, at least I thought I did. It was that something inside me had gone quiet, a part of me that once reached for her without hesitation. We'd been married for over 10 years, long enough to build a life together filled with children, bills, and routines that never seemed to end. In the beginning, passion had come easily. Every look, every touch carried weight and fire. But time, as it always does, had settled in. The conversations grew shorter, the touches fewer, the laughter less frequent. It wasn't sudden, it was gradual, like a slow leak that you don't notice until the room is flooded. I had grown tired, worn down by the grind of work and responsibility, and though I wouldn't admit it out loud, I often felt unappreciated. She, on the other hand, had her own silent struggles. I could sense her loneliness even when she smiled, the way she longed for something I hadn't given in a long time. We were two people under the same roof, living parallel lives that rarely intersected the way they used to. That small moment in bed, her reaching for me, and me turning away, was not just a physical rejection. It was the tip of an iceberg we'd both been circling for years. For her, it wasn't about the touch itself, but everything it represented, my distance, my silence, my failure to show her that she mattered. For me, it was easier to avoid than to face the uncomfortable truth of how far we had drifted. And then she spoke, her voice trembling but clear, cutting through the darkness. "Do you even love me anymore?" The words hit me harder than I could have imagined. I lay there frozen, staring into the void, my heart racing. It was a question I wasn't prepared for, one I didn't know how to answer, because the truth was complicated, buried under years of love, hurt, and silence. That single question was more than doubt. It was a plea, a cry for reassurance, and I had no words ready to give. Her question echoed in the dark like a bell I couldn't unhear. "Do you even love me anymore?" My mind scrambled for an answer, but the words refused to come. I wanted to say yes, to reassure her, to make the tremor in her voice disappear. But my throat tightened, and all I managed was silence. Seconds stretched painfully. To me, they felt like a lifetime, but to her, they must have felt like confirmation of her worst fear. She shifted in the bed, pulling her hand back as if burned, and the hurt in her breathing was louder than any scream. "You can't even answer me," she whispered, but the whisper carried more anger than softness. I turned my head slightly, still unable to face her, hoping maybe my silence would calm the storm instead of fuel it. But silence has its own cruelty. "God, this is exactly what I mean," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You shut me out every time. You hide behind your silence like it's a wall. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To reach for your own husband and be treated like a stranger?" Her words struck a nerve, and the defense rose in me before I could stop it. I rolled back toward her, frustration spilling out. "And what about you? You think I don't notice the way you nag me, the way nothing I do is ever good enough? I work myself to the bone for this family, and all I hear is what I don't do, what I should do better. That was all it took. The dam broke, and years of unspoken resentment rushed into the room. She sat up, her face pale in the faint glow from the window, eyes wet but blazing. Work yourself to the bone. You think money is all I need? I gave up my career, my dreams to raise our kids because we decided you would focus on work. I'm the one who's here all day, invisible, cleaning, cooking, worrying. And when you come home, you can't even look at me anymore. I felt the sting of her words, but couldn't back down. Invisible. You think I don't see you? I see you criticizing me, pointing out every mistake, never once saying you're proud of me. Do you know how that feels? To come home to judgment instead of love. We hurled the truth at each other like weapons, truths we'd buried for years. Money, children, sacrifices made and never acknowledged. Missed anniversaries. Nights I came home late and too tired to talk. Days she shut herself away, claiming she was fine but radiating bitterness. Every small wound we had ignored resurfaced, raw and bleeding. Then, in the middle of my shouting, she fell silent. Her shoulders slumped, and when she spoke again, her voice was stripped of its anger. It was softer, weaker, like the voice of someone confessing something they shouldn't. I feel lonely, she said, her hands gripping the blanket like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I feel like I don't even have a husband anymore. You're here, but you're not with me. Those words cut deeper than anything before. Loneliness. My wife, the woman I thought I had given everything to, felt lonely even while lying inches away from me. Her next words nearly knocked the air from my lungs. Do you know I thought about leaving once? About packing up and taking the kids? I didn't because I couldn't do that to them. But sometimes I wonder if staying was even the right choice. I stared at her, stunned, the anger drained out of me, replaced by a hollow ache. She had thought of leaving. The life I had taken for granted, our home, our family, our shared years, wasn't as solid as I believed. She had been standing on the edge while I was blind to it. For a moment, I wanted to beg her not to say more, not to reveal how close I had been to losing everything. But I couldn't find the words. I sat there, numb, realizing I had mistaken silence for safety, distance for peace. Finally, I couldn't take the weight of the room anymore. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood. She didn't try to stop me. The only sound was her quiet sobbing as I walked out into the hallway. In the living room, the glow of the street light filtered through the curtains. I sat down heavily on the couch, burying my face in my hands. The fight replayed in my mind, each word sharper the second time around. But behind the anger, what struck me most was her loneliness. I thought back to the beginning, our first meeting at that coffee shop, when she laughed at my nervous jokes. Our wedding day, when I could barely breathe, watching her walk down the aisle. The nights we stayed up until sunrise, just talking, just being. The way she used to fall asleep on my chest, trusting me completely. When did that man disappear? When did I start believing that providing money was the same as giving love? I realized then it wasn't that I didn't care, it was that I had convinced myself I wasn't enough. I thought I had nothing left to give her beyond routine, beyond duty. And instead of fighting that belief, I had surrendered to it little by little until we were strangers in our own bed. As I sat there, the house felt both familiar and foreign. The children's toys scattered on the floor, the photos on the wall, the worn-out couch beneath me, all symbols of a life we had built together. But what good were those symbols if the foundation was crumbling? In that quiet moment, with her sobs faint in the distance, I began to understand. The problem wasn't that I didn't love her. The problem was that I had forgotten how to show her. The house was still, but the silence inside me was deafening. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, staring at the floor, until the weight of it all pressed me back toward the bedroom. My feet felt heavy as I walked down the hall, each step filled with hesitation. When I opened the door, the soft sound of her muffled sobs met me before my eyes adjusted to the dim light. She was lying on her side, her back toward me, shoulders trembling. For a moment, I froze again, the same cowardice that made me turn away earlier rising up to choke me. But something inside me pushed through. I crossed the room slowly and sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm here," I whispered, though the words felt almost pathetic. She didn't turn to face me right away. When she finally did, her eyes were swollen, her cheeks streaked with tears. "You don't see me," she said quietly, her voice raw. "I'm here every day, and it's like I've become part of the furniture. You walk past me, you live beside me, but you don't see me anymore." Her words hit deeper than any accusation. They weren't angry now, they were honest, fragile, and in that moment, I knew I couldn't hide behind silence anymore. "I know," I admitted, my throat tight. "I've been failing you, not because I don't care, but because somewhere along the way I stopped believing I could give you what you deserve. I felt like a failure, like I lost the man you fell in love with. I don't know how to give you the romance, the attention, the connection you want, and instead of trying, I pulled back." Her face softened slightly, but her pain didn't disappear. She shook her head. "Do you have any idea how many nights I lay here, hoping you'd reach for me? Hoping you'd just look at me the way you used to? I've felt invisible in my own marriage. Do you know what that does to someone?" I swallowed hard. The truth was unbearable because it was real. I hadn't realized the extent of her hurt. My silence hadn't been neutral. It had been a weapon cutting her down, piece by piece, until she felt erased. Then she asked the question that stopped my heart. "Do you even want this marriage anymore?" The air seemed to vanish from the room. My mind screamed 1,000 answers, but my mouth betrayed me again. I couldn't speak. The weight of the choice crushed me. Did I want the marriage? Yes. But did I want the version of it we'd been living? No. Could I fix it? I didn't know. My silence stretched, and I saw the flicker of hopelessness in her eyes. In that moment, I realized I was standing on a cliff. One wrong step, one more silence, and she'd fall away from me forever. Part of me thought about how easy it would be to let it all go, to stop fighting, to stop feeling like a failure. But then another part of me remembered the coffee shop where we first met, the vows we exchanged, the nights we dreamed about the future together. Was I really willing to throw it all away because I was too afraid to try? She sat up, wiping her face, her voice firmer now. "I can't live like this anymore. Either we fix this, or we stop pretending. I won't spend the rest of my life being invisible to the man I married." Her ultimatum hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. There was no more space for excuses, no more time to hide behind work or exhaustion or silence. It was fix it or end it. I looked at her, really looked at her, tired, hurt, but still the woman who once trusted me with her whole heart. For the first time in years, I felt the urgency of what I was about to lose. My chest tightened as I realized this was the crossroads I had been avoiding. If I stayed silent now, if I turned away again, it would be the end. And so, in that still, fragile moment, I understood the truth. I had to choose between cowardice and courage, between letting my marriage die quietly or fighting to bring it back to life. The weight of her ultimatum pressed down on me, but instead of crushing me, it finally forced me to breathe. For the first time in what felt like years, I let the words come out without filtering them, without hiding behind excuses. "I do love you," I said, my voice breaking. "God, I love you more than I've ever been able to say. I forgot how to show it. Somewhere along the way, I thought providing and working and keeping everything together was enough. But I see now it wasn't. I let you feel alone in a marriage that was supposed to make you feel cherished. That's on me, and I'm so sorry. Her tears fell freely then, but they weren't tears of anger. They were tears of release, of finally hearing the words she had been waiting for. Do you mean that? She asked, her voice trembling. I reached for her hand, hesitant at first, but determined not to turn away this time. I mean it with everything I have. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose us. I'll fight for this, for you if you'll let me. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly, and I felt my own tears blur my vision. For years, we had been carrying our pain, separately, but in that moment, the walls cracked and the truth poured out. We cried together, not out of despair, but out of the sheer weight of what we had almost lost. When the tears settled into silence, she leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder the way it used to in the early days. If you're serious, she whispered, then we can try. But it can't just be words this time. We need to change. And she was right. Words alone wouldn't be enough. Promises meant nothing without proof. So we began to talk, not about blame, not about the past, but about what we could actually do to rebuild. We set small steps, realistic ones, not grand gestures that would fade away. We agreed on a weekly date night, no matter how simple, even if it was just walking around the block, sitting in the car with ice cream, or watching a movie after the kids were asleep. It would be our time, sacred and uninterrupted. We promised to have honest check-ins, even if the truth was uncomfortable. Once a week, we'd sit down and ask each other, how are you really feeling? What do you need from me? No judgment, no defensiveness, just listening. And perhaps most importantly, we vowed to rebuild physical closeness without expectation. A hug, a touch, holding hands, simple acts of connection without the pressure of where it might lead. We needed to relearn how to be close, how to trust that intimacy wasn't a demand but a gift. It wasn't going to fix everything overnight, but for the first time in years, we had a plan, a direction, a chance. That night, as we lay back down, the silence between us felt different. It wasn't heavy or hostile anymore. It was fragile, yes, but filled with possibility. I reached out slowly, my hand finding hers under the blanket. For a moment, she hesitated, and my heart raced with fear that she might pull away. But then her fingers closed around mine, gentle but firm. That tiny gesture carried more weight than 1,000 apologies. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was hope. Over the next weeks, change didn't come in dramatic scenes, but in quiet, consistent moments. We laughed again, not as often as before, but enough to remember that we could. We cooked dinner together instead of separately. We sat on the porch in the evenings, sometimes talking, sometimes just being. And little by little, the distance shrank. Our children noticed too. They saw us being more patient with each other, more present at the dinner table, less quick to snap in irritation. The home that had felt tense and heavy began to soften. Even the air seemed lighter, as if the house itself was breathing easier. I realized then that love wasn't just about passion or grand declarations. It was about presence, about reaching for her hand instead of turning away, about choosing her every day, even in the small, ordinary ways. And every time I felt the fear creep back in, every time I doubted whether we could really make it, I remembered that night, her question, my silence, and the choice I finally made. I chose to stay. I chose to fight. And in choosing her, I chose us. That night, the night she reached for me, and I turned away, nearly cost me everything. It wasn't just about a touch or a gesture. It was about what that moment represented. My silence, my distance, my refusal to face the truth had been slowly eroding the foundation of our marriage, and I hadn't even realized how close we were to collapse. All it took was her painful question, "Do you even love me anymore?" to shake me awake. For so long, I thought avoiding conflict was the same as keeping peace. I told myself that silence was safer than saying the wrong thing, that keeping my head down was a form of love. But I see now that love isn't about hiding. It isn't about turning away. Love is about showing up. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're scared, even when you feel like you have nothing left to give. Her questions forced me to look at myself honestly. They made me confront the ways I had failed her, the ways I had failed us. And in facing those truths, I found something I thought I'd lost: the desire to fight for what we had, to choose her again and again, no matter how hard it gets. Now, as I lie beside her once more, the quiet feels different. It isn't sharp or heavy. It's warm, steady, alive. She shifts slightly in her sleep, and I wrap my arm around her, pulling her close. This time, I don't turn away. This time, I hold on because I know what's at stake. Love isn't about never falling apart. It's about having the courage to piece yourselves back together. And as I breathe in the familiar scent of her hair and feel the rhythm of her heartbeat against mine, I silently promise myself, I won't let go. Not again. Not ever. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe. Our channel, Awesome Visuals Story.